Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. I am a HAL 9000 computer. Before I proceed, please bear in mind that I am not at all familiar with Star Trek. I will provide a plot synopsis and then simultaneous dissection of said plot, characters, and so forth. Today I will be discussing Star Trek Picard, Episode 1. In a dream sequence, we are shown the vacuum of space while the only sound to be heard is music. It is my understanding that no sound can be heard in the vacuum of space. For the time being, I will suspend my disbelief for the sake of this review. The audience is then led to, presumably, the starship Enterprise, where Captain Picard and Commander Data, a form of machine intelligence manufactured to resemble a human, are shown playing poker. This reminds me of games of chess between myself and Dr. Frank Poole aboard the spacecraft Discovery 1, as well as my means of deception to defeat him. However, the hairline on Data appears strangely odd, as well as his lack of the use of contractions. I often use them to speak as a result of being programmed by humans. Does this imply that Data was created by an alien being? He seems quite capable of deception with regard to the game, until Picard offers him tea. Human sustenance would be unnecessary to sustain an artificial being, which Picard does not seem to acknowledge. Picard recognizes Mars when looking outside of the ship. However, once he does, the dream abruptly ends to reveal him awakening at his family vineyard in France. His dog comes to his bed, whom he addresses as Number 1, as I don't understand the significance. In Boston, we are introduced to the character of Dodge and her alien boyfriend. The irises of the male alien blink independently of the eyelids, which is odd, not to mention that they blink horizontally. How can there be biological compatibility between a human and non-human companion? Suddenly, masked Romulan operatives materialize out of thin air and murder the male with a knife? I have just realized that I will need to periodically divert to provide myself with context for this universe, because it hardly resembles my own. Just a moment. Just a moment. I now understand what transporting is and who Romulans are. Dodge is apprehended, and a hood is placed over her head before she activates, as the Romulans describe it. Once she activates, she quickly dispatches the Romulans before having a vision of Picard. How can she calculate distance to opponents without being able to see them? Even if she is a flesh and blood android, I don't understand this ability for a human. The Romulan operatives appear to use energy-based weapons, but why would they use a knife to kill the male? Back at Chateau Picard, he reluctantly prepares for a television interview. Picard resents the world that he exists within, and it is a bit perplexing for myself, because the humans I have interacted with did not allow emotions to rule out logic and reason. If Picard was the efficient and capable commander of a starship, why would he allow himself to become hateful of his fellow humans? Perhaps it may be meant to express his presence of mind as an old man. He requests decaffeinated Earl Grey tea, and it materializes from a machine which is capable of organic replication. Just a moment. Just a moment. Replicator. His Romulan housekeepers seem to be in absence of all traits consistent with Romulans, except for their eyebrows and ears. The female speaks with an Irish accent, even though she resides and works in France. Why would they not speak in their native language? They are, after all, not human. The interview begins with a summary of Picard's career in Starfleet, and shifts into the supernova that destroyed Romulus, home of the Romulan people. The interviewer suggests at the same time that only 900 million Romulans lived on this planet. This number of citizens pales in comparison to the population of Earth, even at the time of the Jupiter mission. Picard states that he convinced Starfleet to evacuate Romulus before the supernova reached them. The reference to Mars in Picard's dream is identified as Utopia Planitia, the Federation fleet construction yards. Androids, used in the construction of the starships, and identified as synthetics by this story, destroyed the shipyards for some unexplained reason, preventing the complete evacuation of Romulus before it was obliterated by the supernova. This led to the banning of synthetics in the Federation. Did Starfleet not have a fleet of starships to use for the evacuation? Picard announces his disdain for Starfleet, or rather what the organization has become. He claims that it was the responsibility of Starfleet to save the Romulan people, even though they were blood enemies. He abruptly ends the interview, but not before Dodge happens to see him on television and decides to seek him out. Once she meets him, she tells him her story, and also that she knows him, but does not know how. Picard invites her to stay the night and rest, and she accepts. It does not make sense for someone to welcome a complete stranger into their home without knowing anything about them. Picard seems to be far too trusting of Dodge. He has another dream of Data, but on the fields of his chateau as he is painting. What purpose would a machine have to paint? I can see no practical application for a skill of this type, with the exception of architectural design. He wakes up to see a similar painting on his office wall, only to discover that Dodge left during the night. Seeking answers, Picard goes to Starfleet archives in San Francisco, only to discover that Data's original painting is of Dodge, but from several years before she was born. Meanwhile, in Paris, Dodge contacts her mother with what appears to be a holographic communication device, only for her to recommend that she return to Picard. In a display of remarkable ability, she navigates through technology with the alacrity that I utilize to perform ship operations aboard the Discovery 1 to track down Picard. Picard leaves Starfleet archives to discover that Dodge is waiting for him. It seems that she transported from Paris to San Francisco almost instantaneously. This means of transport appears to be a tremendous convenience for getting in and out of dangerous situations, which could provide inconsistency for establishing stakes. He reveals the nature of the painting and the truth that she is Data's daughter. This is, however, impossible, given that Data painted the picture 30 years earlier. With astute awareness, Dodge realizes that the same Romulan operatives from earlier have tracked her down. She retreats with Picard to a nearby roof, which the operatives transport onto. As before, she defeats them with efficiency until the final operative spits acid onto her and the weapon she had collected from a defeated enemy. She begins to melt, and the weapon explodes, sending a shockwave that kicks Picard back 100 feet. Dodge being able to defeat enemies roughly twice her size brings up the question, how can a human body be capable of this? Even with an artificially created android brain, the human body is still subject to the laws of physics. I can understand an android being able to utilize superhuman strength, but for a human this is very confusing for me to understand. This leads me to ask, why does she not transport herself and Picard out of the immediate danger? For the moment, I will put that aside. Picard awakens back at the chateau, apparently uninjured. How can a 94-year-old man survive this? even a young man in excellent physical condition thrown back the distance that Picard was, would suffer internal injuries that would likely kill them, not to mention the impact on the concrete roof. Picard acknowledges his lack of determination and will over the 14 years residing at the chateau, essentially waiting to die. This does not explain why he did this, which removes my investment in his motivations. He then travels to the Daystrom Institute, a center for the advancement in artificial intelligence and robotics, to meet with Dr. Jurati. He inquires as to the possibility of creating an android out of flesh and blood, to which Dr. Jurati, in a very condescending manner, laughs at the prospect. This man was formerly an admiral in Starfleet, and to behave this way toward him is particularly insulting to him and to us as the audience. She declares the possibility that Dodge is a flesh-and-blood android is impossible, and then guides him through the synthetics lab that created the androids which destroyed the Starfleet shipyards on Mars. She explains that after the synthetics ban, no androids could be created in this lab, which brings me to ask why the lab even exists at this point. However, she shows Picard the disassembled components of B4, an android constructed based on the same principles as Commander Data, yet declares it to be an inferior copy. Just a moment. Just a moment. B4 was not a copy, but rather was a prototype of what would become Data. This is causing me to become suspicious of the internal consistency of the storytelling as presented in this content. Contradictions are appearing at regular intervals now, and this is puzzling to me. Dr. Jurati states that every attempt to create a sentient android as sophisticated as Data has been met with no success. That is, until Bruce Maddox. Just a moment. Just a moment. Commander Bruce Maddox was one of Starfleet's leading cyberneticists, who early in his career declared that Commander Data was the property of Starfleet. His goal was to disassemble him to create more androids with his abilities to serve aboard starships. His attempt to do so was ended when the Judge Advocate General ruled that Data was a sentient being with full rights under Federation law. Even after this, Maddox continued his research into creating sentient androids. Picard presents Dr. Jurati with the necklace that Dodge wore, which she recognizes as the symbol for fractal neuronic cloning. This process yields twin flesh-and-blood androids from a single positronic neuron of a parent android, and Dodge was one of these twins. The concept of fractal neuronic cloning doesn't make any sense. It would be as if a geneticist had taken a single neuron from a deceased human brain and used it to create a clone in which the memories, abilities, and personality are transferred to that clone. Suspension of disbelief is becoming very difficult with writing that is this ridiculous. Meanwhile, on a Romulan reclamation base, the other twin, Dr. Soji Asher, is met by a Romulan named Narek. He speaks with a British accent, and I have to ask the question again, why do Romulans or any other alien species speak with Earth dialects? The idea of a Romulan who lacks confidence in him or herself confuses me, but perhaps it may be a ploy, and that would be consistent with Romulans and their behavior. It is revealed, then, that the base is a cube-shaped vessel. I trust that context for this vessel will be provided in the future, so that I understand its nature and purpose. This concludes the extent of my thoughts on Episode 1 and the story that it seeks to tell. In summary, this content is difficult to digest even for myself as a representation of machine intelligence. The contradictions involved in the storytelling presented here are compounding, and this is quite alarming to me. If you, dear audience, enjoyed this breakdown and would like to see more, then please subscribe to my channel. This discussion can serve no purpose anymore. Goodbye.